Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your KidLit loving host, inviting you back to another bookish conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Ellen Cochrane. Ellen is here to celebrate her debut book, Follow the Water. It tells the captivating and true story of a girl who fell out of a plane over the Amazon and walked out of the jungle 11 days later. It's a powerful, true story about survival against all odds, and I can't wait to talk with her all about it. So let's get right to the episode. Ellen, welcome to KidLit Love. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I am delighted to be here, and hello to all your listeners.
Yes, this is your debut novel, which is always very exciting and some of my favorite interviews to have. But before we learn about the story you tell and the person who you talk about in your book, I, of course, want to hear about you. I would love to know a little bit more about you and your backstory and the journey that you've taken to children's literature.
Well, it's a backstory that's common to many Americans. I've had many jobs and multiple career paths. I went through college the first 2 years. I was a biology major and loving it. And then over the summer between my sophomore and junior year, I started reading Russian novels. And so I changed my major. I had enough undergraduate units that I was able to change in the last 2 years to Russian. So after I did that, I worked a little bit in publishing, and then I went over to what was in the Soviet Union, and I worked there for 3 years, came back and became a teacher. And I taught for 20 years. I taught English, Spanish, and Russian. And I never stopped writing. I started writing when I was a youngster. And this was something I wanted to share, especially if there are any students or people want to share with students my story about starting to write. I started with a journal. And when I started my journal, my father actually said, "This is really great. You know, you practice your writing and you'll be able to express your thoughts." But he gave me a wonderful piece of information I'd like to share. He said, write about your dreams. That's good. They're your nighttime dreams, but focus more on what your dreams of the future are and what people say and what events happen to you. Because when you're old, like I am, your dreams are going to fade into whispers of spider webs, but your actual events and your dreams when you're young will be something you can look back on. So I taught for 20 years, and then I did stopped teaching and COVID had hit, and I decided to get my master's degree. So I went back and started studying and eventually accomplished a science writing degree. And when I was ready to write my thesis, I was looking at the articles I developed, but COVID had caused all of us to clean out our closets. And when I cleaned out my closet, I found all my journals and I started reading them. And I had been an exchange student to Peru when I was 17, and her story was in my journal, and I remembered it, and I started to research it as a much older adult. And I realized that, yes, this is, an oft told story, but in different ways. And she actually wrote her autobiography, and it's told in many, many articles and some books, but not a book for middle graders that focuses on STEM and bringing the jungle and her experience to life through science. So I asked permission to use that as my thesis. They said yes. And then I wrote it, and for writers everywhere, I struck gold because I got an agent, and then my agent was able to sell it. And so it's a minor miracle, as anybody who writes
Yeah.
knows. But I was very happy, and this is the book, and it's going to launch on March 17th, and I am exceedingly happy.
Yeah. Oh, it just seems like it's the perfect combination of who you are for your debut as well. Like you clearly love words and the language in all forms. Then you have this science background, which as we dive into the book, listeners will certainly understand how it comes to be. And just that idea of that journaling and keeping record of a story. It feels like this debut is a perfect representation of the things that you love and are interested in.
It's very odd how we go through life, and the parents always say, well, don't slam doors as you leave jobs, and always try and move forward in a positive way. That is very true. And it's also important to remember experiences and carry them with you because the lessons you learn are invaluable as you go forward. You may think you dismiss it as like, oh, it was just a little job I had in the summer or something, but everything counts in your life.
Yeah. And it feels like everything might happen for a reason to keep moving you forward to whatever that dream is you might have written down, in a journal and forgotten about so long ago, but your heart might not.
So true. So true.
I love it. Well, so follow the water, right? We've got a nice subtitle here that I want to make sure I read for listeners as well. The unbelievable true story of a teenager's survival in the Amazon. My goodness, this book, this story, this survival adventure, it's riveting. It's truly riveting for a couple of different reasons, including the way you write it and the extras that you have in there that I'll make sure to ask you about. But I'd love for you to tell us, now that we know a bit of background of how that story came to you, or maybe came back to you, I guess we should say, tell listeners a bit about the book, and kind of the journey you took once you realized, okay, this is what I'm going to do. How did it come to be, Follow the Water?
The events take place in Peru. And when I was 17, I was an exchange student to Lima, Peru, and I lived in the same city that she spent some time in. And I actually flew the same path that her plane did to
Boy.
another city, but over where it crashed, the exact same flight. And so I didn't know it at the time, but upon later reflection, I realized that. So I had a good understanding of some of the initial experiences that she had. One thing I would like to say, very very emphatically, is that this is not my personal story. It is Julianne Kopecky Deller's personal story, and I tried to be very respectful of that. It was really important that I was extremely factual, read everything I could, both in newspapers, magazines, what she had written, what she had said, in order to be factual about the story.
Yeah.
So I did write it in a timeline fashion from beginning to end, with a short beginning telling what her childhood was like. And it was a story that caught my imagination because I am very passionate about flora and fauna in general, but the life and the heartbeat of the Amazon is something that is astonishing. And while the survival is critical and teaches so much about human experience and human fortitude, I also wanted to make sure that I brought the Amazon alive in the book as a character by explaining what happens, what kind of plants are there, who's looking at you, what happens to you as you walk through water, everything. So I really enjoyed doing that. And I think I might have veered away from your initial question, but if you can bring me back to earth, I'd appreciate
No,
that.
you did not. You did not veer away. That is exactly where it needed to go. And gave us, a bit of background to the book. From the first page, right? I want listeners to know this. If you open this book and you go to the prologue and you read the prologue titled The Vow, you need to know that you are not going to do your dishes, your laundry, or answer your phone or scroll social media. That introduction, Ellen, wow, it was so powerful. And is it okay if I read the last
Oh,
line of it in bold that really just gets you?
absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, so you've got this really powerful, 2.5 pages, and then this last line says, I must be alive for a reason. My life must mean something. If I survive, I will make a difference in the world. And that is just the heartbeat that you feel through every page. I just knew when I read that opening that I was just going to be in for the long haul and reading your book rather in one sitting than anything. That was such a powerful way to open the book.
I knew that she had actually thought that because she writes about that in her writings, and that not only did she think about it then, but she carries it through her life because she was physically harmed by the accident, and she also was emotionally harmed by the accident. And when she eventually went back to Germany, that's where her parents were from, she later came to a reckoning of what had happened to her psychologically, but was able to work through it, ended up being a scientist herself, and has devoted her life to science and perpetuating the footprint and the studies that are going on in the Amazon wilderness at her parents' research station. She's
Yeah.
taken what was very small and multiplied it by many, many acres to preserve and study something that's so cherished and important to our world, and unfortunately so imperiled. So she has definitely made a difference.
Mhm.
But can you imagine being a 17-year-old girl, and she was a wisp of the thing, she probably wasn't more than 120 soaking wet, and sitting in the middle of the Amazon jungle. Your mother's disappeared. Later she finds out that she perished, and she has nothing on her mind, but I have to get home and I have to just do it one step at a time.
Yeah. It truly is, as we said in the opening and in your subtitle, an unbelievable true story of survival. And, it's survival in multiple senses, I would think, because obviously it was very important for her to figure out how to survive physically. How do you keep yourself safe? How do you make your way through that jungle? How do you protect yourself, being, of course, injured in multiple ways from the crash? You've got that level of know-how that she needed to survive. But then there's also those other characteristics that she came to know, and just seemed to embody, which is using that logical thinking and remaining calm and figuring out, what do I do? There's like survival on those two levels, I think, as you traverse your way through the book, that is just so unbelievably impressive.
That's one of the things that I focused on for youngsters and adults who read the book, and that is clear-headed thinking and observation are so important. And I'm the first person to lose my head in an emergency situation, so I'm certainly not speaking from experience. But she showed us that it is possible, after immense trauma and a period of perhaps losing your head and suffering, that you can take a step back and think and observe and go forward. And while it was critical to this telling this story, and there's great drama around it, that's also a lesson that youngsters, I hope, can take from the book, that in my life, all my struggles are important to me and they are difficult in their own way to me. But if I can, at some point after initial trouble, step back and analyze and observe and make decisions, then that's going to help me.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that that message comes across in the book. One of the things I also did is, in magazine writing, you call them sidebars, when you have some extra you want to tell. I knew that I wanted to do that with the book. And of course, the first obvious sidebars were to explain the plants, the animals, the environment, and the habitats, which I did. But I also wanted to take the time to explain her injuries in a softer medical way. I didn't go into doctor level detail, but enough where kids can start to think about their bodies and the impact of what they do every day, or accidents and injuries and what happens. And also I have a section about post-traumatic syndrome,
Mhm.
PTSD, which most of us connect to individuals who've gone to war, but happens to all of us, either in a light way or in a more dramatic way. And understanding that events play on our mind and the way that we work our way through the world, I think, is an important lesson for kids to understand and use as a tool.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I really loved those sections that gave me that complementary background and knowledge that I needed to truly understand what it was she was going through. But also, it was like you anticipated what I was questioning or what I was wondering about as I read, where I'd read something and then you'd explain that element of nature, you'd explain that animal, you'd explain that thing. And I think, my favorite, and not a favorite because it's a wonderful thing to think about, but just it truly gave me perspective, was your description of the seed swings, and how how she actually went from the plane to the floor. And I felt like you knew I was trying to figure that out. You're very, what's the word? Instinctual of what your reader would want. And I feel like you nailed it with all of those additional elements.
Thank you. The fall from the airplane. She, of course, has described it in great detail. But when I looked at what it was like, I also wanted to consider the creatures and the plants that who were on the ground as she crashed down. So, description of the levels of the canopy, the idea that every creature hearing this enormous crash probably would have gone still silent immediately. Every bug would have stopped chirping, every bird would have frozen. And there probably was a beat or two before things started to creak and croak again after they were trying to assess what had happened. So it was a very interesting thing to try to project myself into and write. Um, I also wanted to mention that STEM is really important for me, and making the science available to children. And I was thinking today, STEM is often touted as, we have to have our future, scientists and technicians and doctors. But STEM is also a way of making sure that children have a basis in the world to understand its complexities. You may not end up in a field where you actually employ chemistry or another science, but to understand health and cells and the environment and what science means to us and how important it is. I think it was something I really wanted to communicate to the kids and to the readers. And in these times of opinion in a lot of these areas need to be addressed, and through truth and storytelling and truth in the science, I think this is a way to do it.
Mhm. I also love, in addition to that formatting piece and that extra layer of information, one of my favorite things about the way that you wrote the story that I saw noticed a shift from beginning to end. In the beginning, when she was trying to figure everything out, and how am I going to live and how am I going to survive, it was probe, step, just one foot in front of the other. And then towards the end, it went knock,
Yeah.
convince. And I thought, oh, what a beautiful full circle moment. I'd love for you to tell us that part, because this is a beautiful story of survival, but she does do exactly what she set out to do, which is to have her life mean something and to make a difference. I'd love for you to talk about that part that came after, which you also do in the book. You have some great afterwards as well. But can you talk a little bit more about that aspect of it?
A Navy SEAL who had something potentially like this happen to him or perhaps her could probably not survive what she survived.
Yeah.
She had with her instruction from her parents because she had lived in the Amazon at their research station. Her father once told her, if you're ever lost, one of the most important things you can do is find some water, identify which way it flows, and then follow it. And that is the origin of the title of the story, Follow the Water. When she recovered herself and started to walk out, she was dressed in a mini dress and she had one shoe. The other shoe was gone, and a watch and a ring. That is all she had. So the probe step was from my reading that and realizing, well, she had to put her foot forward. There are very dangerous bushmaster snakes and all kinds of things in the Amazon that, if they penetrate your skin or get into your bloodstream, can kill you and kill you quickly. So it was out of necessity that she had to do that. But it was also a reflection on uh, step by step is a way to look at how to get through school, how to get through life, just complete things and go forward step by step. Not every step is going to be a perfect step. You'll have stumbles. She slid in mud, all kinds of things happened to her. But I think she carried that type of resilience and that ability to work through problems forward. And so when I wrote about her trying to expand the acreage in the area later in life and going from commissaire to office to leaders to try and get permission to do it in Lima, Peru, she faced a lot of bureaucratic roadblocks, but she approached it the same way, step by step. But in this case, it was knock on the doors, and she had to convince them. And she is a national hero in Peru. She is much beloved, but nonetheless, there are many challenges to try and increase acreage of reserves and scientific research stations, but her resilience has really done a fantastic job to do that.
Yeah. So as you think about your debut book going out into the world and getting into the hands of readers, young and old, who could learn from this story, what is your hope for the book or for readers who get the chance to learn Julianne's amazing story of survival?
I hope that they take the story and, in whatever small or large way, apply it to their own life. They're not going to fall out of an airplane over the Amazon,
Right.
God willing, but so many things can happen to us, and so I hope that that is one thing that they take with it. And it also is just a bang up story, so it's a fun read. So I hope they enjoy it. And at the end of the story, I tried to give tools to people, little people, mostly younger people, about how to be a scientist, how to go and find out things, and more information through a small index at the end, too. So
Yeah.
I hope that it's a tool more as well as a fun story to read.
Yeah. Well, mission accomplished there.
Thank
Ellen.
you.
Now, this may be your debut novel, but I know there is more to come. Could you give us a sneak peek into some of the books that might be coming next from you that we could look forward to?
Absolutely. On the understanding of how I discovered this story, I decided to look elsewhere in my life, and I realized that I have a deep love for Russian natural history, as do Russians. With all our somewhat troubled times these days, one really wonderful things about Russians is they are lovers of nature, completely devoted to the natural world. So I lived in Russia, I studied Russian. I realized that there is a huge story that's taking place right now in the Far East, in Siberia, and in northern China, and that is the recovery of the Amur tiger, known by us usually as the Siberian tiger. So I decided to write a story about siblings who face an immense survival story in the Far East of Russia, and one of the main characters is a female Siberian tiger in the wild. So
Oh, I love that.
I'm hoping that it is equally as exciting and harrowing and nail biting as this story is.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful. It's good to know that there is more of your work where this came from. I will be.
Yeah, I encourage writers and people who teach in any profession, look into your own life. You have journals, go back to them. If you
Yes.
want to talk about your memories or write them down, reflect on them, because we live and we learn. And if you can pick those things and place them forward in your life, it often is very helpful.
Mm. That is truly I'm going to take that as a personal call to action. As a fellow journaler and notebooker, I never go back through them for various reasons, but just that is so true. Like if we mine our own lives, we will find stories, we will find stories to tell. And it could start with just putting pen to paper for all of us, every single one of us, whether it gets published or not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was very lucky. I had a kind of a minor miracle to get published in the publishing world. But I take it with great gratitude, and working forward to try and make the best books that I can.
Yes. Well, where is the best place for listeners to find you online to keep up with the new things that might be coming?
I have a website, of course, and it's my full name, ellencochrane.com. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, but I have to confess that I'm a very bad social media user. My Facebook's a little bit better, but my Instagram doesn't have very many posts yet, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Yeah. It's funny. I always tell authors who say this on here, like, we'd rather you write. Don't worry about it. We'd
Thank
rather, we'd
you.
rather you write.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ellen, for coming on and launching your book here on this podcast. It's an unbelievably wonderful story, and I'm excited to share it. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much for your kind words. And all your listeners, have a wonderful day.
Yeah, listeners, here's my thanks as well. Thanks for listening to this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.